Hi, my name is Rob Raguet. I am a user interface architect for Wolfram Research. My talk is titled Wolfram Player for iOS, and I will be introducing the iOS version of the Wolfram Player app we recently introduced that is available now for iPads and iPhones. All right, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. My name is Rob Raguet. I work at Wolfram Research in the user interface department, and I am one of the members of a team who has been working for a bit of time on this product that we have just released called Wolfram Player for iOS. And that is the app that you're looking at on the screen right now. One thing that's going to be a fairly significant difference between this talk and a talk you may have seen me give at a previous conference is that I'm not using an app that I built myself on my computer and transferred onto my iPad. I'm using the app that is available in the App Store right now, and anyone can go here and download this. It's a free download, so I highly recommend everyone do that. And I was just noticing that I haven't given it a review, so I'm just going to go ahead and give it a review real quick. So, this is Wolfram Player, and as I said, this is now a released app. We've been working on it for a number of years. Several months ago, we made it available to many people who may be in this room as a beta. And we thank many of you for participating in that program and submitting to us some valuable feedback. We've been working our way through lots and lots of issues over the past several months, and as of 2 weeks ago, the app was finally released. And it will run on both an iPad or iPhone, as long as it's running iOS 9.3 or higher. And it is, as I said, a free download. So the free app that you get will display the contents of arbitrary CDF documents, which is possibly a little bit different from what I had described in the past. So even dynamic content will now display for you in the free version, whereas previously dynamic content was just kind of blocked. Now the dynamic content is displayed for free. You can't immediately interact with it, but I'll get to that in just a second. But you can view and even rotate 3D graphics in the free version also. So if you want to enable full dynamic interactivity, this is something that's optional, and you can do it in one of three ways that I have listed here. So you can work with enterprise CDF documents, which is a way to author the documents. So if you have an enterprise version of Mathematica, which I think costs a little bit more money, you can sign these CDF documents, and then anyone can look at them and interact with them for free. The second option is to subscribe to Wolfram Cloud, and that will, once you log into your Wolfram Cloud account in the app, that will enable all dynamic interactivity. And the third option is just a one-time in-app purchase of about $10 US, and that will enable all dynamic interactivity for any document for your account. So this app has a number of interesting features. So you can open documents from anywhere. We allow you to log into Wolfram Cloud accounts directly in the app. And I can just give you an example of that. If I go back here, this document that I'm viewing is actually in a Wolfram Cloud account. So there's a few different sections. I have some locally stored documents. I have a couple of Wolfram Cloud accounts that I'm signed into, and I can just view all my files, navigate through the folder hierarchy, and go to the file I want, and here I am. You can download files from the web, and if anyone was in the room before the talk started, you may have seen me do that a couple times. I went to the demonstrations.wolfram.com and was able to go find a demonstration that I want to look at. I'm going to tap the download link, and it's going to ask me if I want to open that in Wolfram Player, and I say yes, of course, and then I can just view the file immediately. And this is now stored locally, so I can come back to it if I want without having to go back to the web. The same works for web downloads, also works for email attachments, also works for other cloud services, iCloud, Dropbox, Google Drive, any of those. If you have a CDF or notebook file stored on any of those services, you can get to them in the app and open the document directly. And then you can also sync documents with iTunes, which is a little bit more complicated and cumbersome process, but it's the one way to do it without using some sort of network cloud service. So what does this app do? It does local computations. So the Wolfram engine is embedded inside the app. It doesn't need a network connection to do any of the computations. Everything's done locally. So the benefit of that is improved performance, and you can do it when you're offline. So we have user interface and experience that are appropriate for the platform. So when we have tap targets, things like buttons, for instance, they're all going to be finger-sized, so you can get your finger on them to tap them. You don't have to necessarily have a very precise location for a very imprecise pointing device. And the manipulate controls, by default, will be positioned at the bottom of the screen so that you're not having to cover the content with your hand and kind of have to look around your hand to see what you're actually manipulating. But there's a way to get around that if that doesn't work for your particular application. So it supports all of the features of computable documents, typesetting, and I have the font size. There we go. Graphics, and these aren't static bitmaps that are rendered at one size. We can zoom this, and it continues to look nice as we zoom in as far as we can get here. Graphics 3D, same sort of thing, and this has also the feature where we can rotate the 3D graphics. We can toss them so you can get it going, and then it will keep going for a little bit. We can use.
What are you actually manipulating?
Well, so just a single finger will rotate it, and then you can toss it. Yeah, no controls. And then you can do 2-finger gestures to pan the graphic around, and you can pinch to zoom in to the graphic. And as I mentioned earlier, 3D graphics, viewing and interacting with them, both available in the free version of Wolfram Player. So dynamic content, this will, you can view and interact with dynamic content, same as you can on a desktop system. If you want to interact with the dynamic content, and what I mean is to tap on this checkbox and have it respond to the tap. That is what requires the enhanced functionality, which I mentioned earlier. You can get through an enterprise CDF or a cloud subscription or an in-app purchase. So I can tap on this and the document will respond to it. And of course, that includes everyone's favorite manipulate. So we tap on the manipulate and we get controls at the bottom here. And we can interact with the control without covering it. And there are some features that are specific to touch that aren't necessarily meaningful on a desktop system. So on a desktop system, we have a function called mouse position, which always returns a list of XY coordinates. On a touch screen, that's not super useful because there may not be a current touch happening, or there could be more than one. So we have a new function called touch position, which is an analog to mouse position, but it could return 0 coordinates, or it could return, I actually don't know what the maximum is, but I have tested it. And I can definitely get all 10 fingers on. And then there is an option to manipulate, which is similar to the existing control placement option, which we kind of ignore on a touchscreen because many manipulates authored with this option were kind of created without thinking about a touchscreen. So by default, we put the controls at the bottom. If you have a different control placement that would be better in your specific case, like here, I have an example that just uses a vertical slider, and I've decided I didn't want to put a vertical slider at the bottom of the screen and have it take up a bar all the way across when it's a very narrow, tall thing. So I'm going to put it at the side of the screen instead, and I can do that with this touchscreen control placement arrow right, and I can have my same manipulate with the controls in a different place there. So we certainly aim for this to be as compatible as possible with desktop versions of Mathematica. And one thing that I'll just note real quick, if you look at the version information, this is version 11.1.2 of Mathematica or of Wolfram Player for iOS, but this is really a version 1 product. This is kind of a brand new thing. And so there are some ways which it is not 100% compatible with the desktop versions of Wolfram Player. So some of the limitations that we know about, since this is a player app, it does not allow content creation. It only allows you to view and interact with existing content. So you still need to use either your desktop version or your Wolfram Cloud to create new content. And we do have a Wolfram Cloud app for iOS, which if you need to create something on your iOS device, you can use the Wolfram Cloud app. And then if you want to interact with that content in a way that's offline and or potentially with better performance due to the local computations, then you can download it into the Player app and interact with it there.
May I ask a quick question?
Yes?
If you use the Mathematica Enterprise edition to create, say, the CDF with input fields, can you enter data into such a CDF on iOS, or you won't be able?
Yeah. Yes, you can. So we do have support for input field, and as I mentioned in just a moment, it is somewhat more limited than what it is in the desktop version. And I'll get to that real quick. Yeah?
Does the player do anything with NB files?
Yes. If you look in the title bar, the document that I'm using right now is an NB file. So the one way it makes a distinction is if you have an enterprise signed CDF file, that will allow you to do dynamic interactivity for free, and any other file won't. Okay? So we do have some incomplete features that we know about. One is slideshows, which I'm sure many of you have noticed I'm not using a slideshow to display this, which is a little bit unfortunate, but we know about it, and it's something that's high on our priority list to get fixed as soon as possible. Things like event handler, we don't have good support for. Certain examples of locator, if it's outside of a manipulate, we don't support that at the moment. Input field, we allow entering of plain text, of numbers, but what we don't have support for is typesetting inside an input field. And things like JLink and database link, these are built on top of Java, and these are things that are never going to work on the iOS version of Wolfram Player. And then one other thing to consider is performance. I have given a talk somewhat similar to this for a few years at the conference now, and over that time, I used to say, be prepared, the performance is going to be nowhere near what it is on a desktop system. And within the last 2 years, that's kind of changed dramatically. The speed of new iOS devices in the last 2 years is pretty remarkable, especially compared to what it was in the past. I have an iPhone 7, which has a faster CPU than my wife's MacBook. The new iPhones that were just released have a faster CPU than a lot of the MacBook Pros that Apple is currently selling brand new. So this used to be a big issue. It's less of an issue anymore, especially if you have a device that's less than 2 years old. If you have an older device, you could still run into some performance problems. And a lot of these devices keep running year after year after year, and so people don't necessarily upgrade them. So that's something to think about. You may not get super smooth animation or interactivity if you have an iPad 3, for example. And the older devices also had a pretty small amount of RAM. So if you're doing computations in the Wolfram engine that use a lot of RAM, sometimes it runs out. And there are cases where we handle that more gracefully than others. Sometimes the app will be just killed by the operating system, and there's not really anything we can do about it. So if that happens for inexplicable reasons, but you have reason to believe, maybe this computation was using a lot of memory, that would be one way to look at going about trying to fix that. Did you have a question?
Yeah, actually, just have a comment about the input field. So
Okay.
I work for a trading firm, and most of the time, traders enter the prices in input field using the keypad and the enter key on the keypad. But that enter key is not the same as the other enter key because it's a shift enter, and that creates a lot of problems for us. So if it was possible to have an option in input field that it can work as a regular and enter the one on the keypad, that would be great.
Okay. I will just say, in this particular app on iOS, that isn't an issue because there's only one enter key, and we don't support shift enter evaluations at all. So the enter is the one and only thing that we can do.
But this is my comment was for generic CDF.
Sure. And one other limitation, as I'm sure several people noticed from Stephen's talk last night, he killed the kernel a few times when he was having problems. That's not something that we can really do in the app right now. We can't restart the Wolfram engine from within the same process at the moment. So if your Wolfram engine runs away out of control, then you kill the app and you'll have to bring the UI back up also. So we think, we spent a fair bit of time on it. We think what we have now available to everyone is a pretty solid product. We're quite happy with it, but as I said, this is a 1.0 version, despite the fact that it's version 11.2.1. But we received a lot of valuable feedback during the beta process. But since we released it to the general public, that has increased significantly, and we've just been receiving tons of really useful feedback. Lots of things where the app didn't work as expected, or something didn't appear on the screen exactly the same way as it does on desktop. And people have been reporting those issues to us, and we've been fixing them. So we are going to have more releases fixing lots of these types of bugs. We've already fixed dozens and dozens of user-reported bugs since the release 2 weeks ago. We have a version coming out that's going to use the Wolfram engine version 11.2. Right now it's based on 11.1, so all the new features in 11.2 will be available. And as I said, slideshow support is something that's high on our list. And these are things that we all hope to do by the end of the year, and that is a pretty realistic expectation, I think. So what you all can do is get the app. If you haven't done it already, install the app on your iPhone and iPad from the App Store. You just have to go to the App Store and search for Wolfram Player. It will show up. You can get it for free. You're going to most likely want to enable full interactivity. As I mentioned, we have 3 ways of doing that. You can work with Enterprise CDF. This is CDF documents created by an enterprise version of Mathematica. Interactivity is available to everyone with those documents, regardless of whether they have a cloud subscription or an in-app purchase. You can get a cloud subscription that will enable interactivity in your app once you sign in with your cloud account that has a subscription, or you can do the one-time in-app purchase. And these are the ways you can enable dynamic interactivity. Once you do that, you can take your content with you through any number of ways I mentioned earlier. You can download them through a web browser, through a cloud file system like iCloud, Dropbox, Google Drive. You can get them through email. You can sync them with iTunes, anything like that. Take your documents with you, and then please, if you see problems, if you see things that don't look right, report those issues to us, and we will do our best to improve the compatibility.